Hello students, today we will be going over 12.6, Proving Triangles Congruent. Our objective, I can complete a two-column proof to prove two triangles are congruent. If we are saying a certain side is congruent, we will be using one of four reasons. It's either given, reflexive property, that's like saying if one side is congruent in both triangles, that would be using the reflexive property. Definition of midpoint, if I have something like this, and I say that AB and C is the midpoint of AB, I could say that AC is congruent to CB by definition of midpoint. Okay? All right. Definition of bisector, if I have a line and I say this line bisects that line right there, I could say that AC is congruent to CB because that bisects the line. So those are the four reasons you want to say a side is congruent. Next over here, the reason angles are congruent. One, it's given, and that's just if something is marked like this angle is congruent to, say, this angle over here, then it's given. Or it tells you angle B is congruent to angle C over there. Then you could say given. Vertical angles, that reason would be this is congruent to that. Then you know vertical angles are always congruent. Next, definition of bisector. If I have an angle here, and I say this ray right here bisects these two angles, I can say those two are congruent. Okay? Then alternate interior angles, if I hear that these are parallel lines and I have a line that goes through them, I can say that this angle is congruent to that angle. If I had a triangle there and a triangle here, I could say those are congruent because they're alternate interior angles, but these would have to be parallel lines with either a symbol given there with the arrow or with something saying line L is parallel to line M. So again, alternate interior angles of parallel lines there would be congruent. So that one is congruent to this one right there. Okay. All right. Again, this is page 256 in your green packet. Let's go on to part 2. This is number 5. So you can go through those other ones on your own. I'm going to go on to number 5, and it's page 257. Given AC is congruent to AD. So we want to use one of our reasons for sides. So we can go back here knowing we have to use one of these four. And why do we know that AC is congruent to AD? Because it is given. They tell you that. So I'm going to write given here. And I'm also going to mark it on this right here. So we need to practice marking it and writing it down. So AC with one mark here is congruent to AD, one mark there. Okay. Now, what else is given? Well, it says CB is congruent to DB. So that's what we want to do, is write that. CB, always write everything that you're given first. CB is congruent to DB. CB right here is congruent to DB. Next, they give us a clue on the reflexive property. Okay, so again, we're proving ABC is congruent to ABD. So what's the reflexive property? Remember, it's when something is congruent to itself. So we're going to say AB is congruent to AB. And I'm going to mark that with 3. Now, can we prove the triangle's congruent? Okay, we don't know anything about the sides or the angles, but we know that all 3 sides are congruent. So we can say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ABD. And why? Because we can use, can you see that far down? We can use side, side, side congruence. Okay? And that's number 5 on 257. We're going to go on to another one. We will do number 8. Okay, let's see what we're given first. PR bisects angle QRS. And then these angles are congruent. So first thing that we're given, it says given here. So I'm going to say that PR bisects angle QRS. So PR, make sure you put a line so we know it's a line segment, bisects angle QRS. That's given. Let's go ahead and mark it on our diagram here. PR bisects QRS. So that means that this angle is congruent to this angle. Okay? So PSR right here is congruent to PQR. So it's saying this is congruent to this. Why do we know that? Because it's given. Next, it tells us a reason is definition of bisector. So, definition of bisector, we know that angle PRS, this one with one arch, is congruent to PRQ right there from definition of bisector, because we know that this line bisects this bigger angle, which means it has two equal angles here. Okay, so I'm going to say angle PRS is congruent to angle PRQ. So again, this one's congruent to that by definition of bisector. Now it says PR is congruent to PR. Again, we can go back to this. Say if it's sides, it has to be one of these 4. So do you know which one it should be? Reflexive property. If it's congruent to itself. So I guess I could just put 1. That's the first one, so I could just put 1. So we know that reflexive property. Now, can we prove anything congruent? Angle, angle, side. Is that one of our 4 that we can use? And the answer to that is yes. It's not angle, 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 and it's not a swear word. So it's not that, and it's not a swear word. So we can prove that triangle, again, we were trying to do this in the beginning, PSR is congruent to triangle PQR. And we can prove that by angle, angle, side. Angle, angle, side. Okay? All right, we can either pause the video or I can do one more. Okay, it gets a little bit harder. Number 9, you're given some things and you're given some other things here. So, page 259, number 9. First thing we want to do, let's push this up a little bit so you have everything that you need. We're going to put everything that's given first. So I'm going to start with JL is congruent to NM. And I'm going to put given. JL, that's right there. NM is right there. They're congruent. Okay, the next one, K is the midpoint of JN. And I'm going to write that down here. That's given. And I'm going to move this over because I'm going to need more space here too for 3. For 3, I'm going to put K as the midpoint of LM. And that is also given. Now, I haven't written them on the triangle, so I need to do that part next. So K is the midpoint of JN. Okay, so that's given. So we know that's the midpoint of this line segment, and that's the midpoint of this line segment. So we could say that AC, oh, no, sorry. We could say that JK, just kidding, no, yeah, you can, is congruent. What is JK going to be congruent to? KN. And why is that? So we're talking about sides, so we can go back to our original one. Say, what are the ones on sides here? Definition of midpoint, because we were talking about midpoint. So we can put definition of midpoint. Okay. What else do we know? We know that LK is congruent to KM. Why? Because K is also the midpoint of this line segment. So we say LK is congruent to KM. And that is definition of midpoint. Okay, now I think we can prove that 2 triangles are congruent. Triangle, again, the last one is what you're trying to prove. The first ones are always what is given. Okay, so triangle JKL is congruent to triangle NKM. Why do we know that? Side, side, side. By side, side, side congruency. Okay? All right, students, you can do the rest. You rock.